like 12-page treatise on what to do about honoring abusive parents.
Okay.
And you don't.
Okay.
Not honor them. And I'll share it next week, but she went off and researched it right away and found some really great, Talmudic teachings about it.
That's very good. I think what I found was it's for the Yitzhak service.
Yisker, yeah.
Yisker service, and that's where they have that alternative.
Okay.
True alternatives.
All right. Hi, Miriam. Hi, Phyllis. Nice to see you. Hi, Roy.
Hi, Rabbi Susan.
Hi, Ken and Julie. I'm waiting for you to show your face one of these days.
Excuse me, do you hear me?
Yes. Is this Hannah?
Yes, right. Thank you. I'd like to know, I saw in the calendar that at this time, there will be also Torah studies by Rabbi Leader.
No, not today. No.
When it is then?
It's every, we alternate. This week it's me, Rabbi Nanus.
Oh, but next Friday will be Rabbi Leader?
I'm not sure yet. I don't know. I mean, we all take turns because we do some things. So if you look on the website, it will tell you.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Miriam, you're muted. You're muted. You're muted. Unmute yourself if you want to talk.
No, I just lost my picture for a while.
Oh, okay. Okay. Hi, Nan. I love to see you. I see all these names. Susan, Lucille, Hannah, Harold. But you're not showing yourselves yet. Hopefully you will.
Here's Olive.
Aw.
Hi there, Abby.
Hi.
Hi, Harold.
Hello.
And this is Olive.
Hi, Olive. That's a cute name for a dog. Olive. Hi, Rodney. What are you guys in different rooms?
Yeah.
We're taking advantage of
We have a
our
lot of bandwidth in this
our
house.
Zoom connections.
That's nice. That's great.
Guess who I have, Rodney?
So just wait a few
Olive
minutes.
needs her own computer.
I don't know how many
She
times.
loves Zooms.
Like, oh my God. All right. So what's new? Everybody healthy? Everybody okay? Okay, so far so good. It's just scared to go out of your house.
Yeah.
It's like
How's your puppy situation?
Didn't you hear when I had to give him back?
Yeah, that's why I was wondering if you'd moved on and started, hoping to find someone that is sweet, as nice as that one was.
Well, actually, my daughter is going to go back to school and she's decided to save money. She's giving up her apartment and moving in with me, which I'm thrilled about. But she has 2 cats.
Oh, no.
So it's just as well.
You need the allergist.
No, I'm not allergic. Hi, Jill. You're muted. You know you're muted? Okay. You want to be muted? Rabbi Leaders, next Torah study session is July 31st, Hannah. If you're July 31st.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So nobody else wants to show themselves?
Yes.
Okay, I want to show yourself. Okay, well, I'm going to start, and then if people join us, if they don't, we're going to have a great intimate discussion. Oh, here's Peg. But we can start with our bracha, our blessing of studying Torah. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah. So, here's Nan. She's slowly coming on. Peg, we can't see you. Love to see you. So this is the last, hi Nan. This is the last parsha in the book of Numbers, Bamidbar, which literally, I don't know why, I know why it's called Numbers, because it starts with a census, but really in Hebrew, it's a much better title for the book, Bamidbar, which means in the desert. Because this is basically the whole time they're in the desert, and it's also when we know we had the spies, and then they were, hi Jeff, we know that they were condemned to wander for 40 years till the rebellious and unprepared generation died out, and their younger generation took over. So it's very interesting because really the Torah was just this for a few hundred years. The last book, the book of Deuteronomy, which I'm going to be talking about, actually, I'm going to be doing Shabbat services a week from tomorrow when we start the book of Deuteronomy, was written several hundred years later, and it was actually discovered in like 620 BCE when the priests were cleaning out the temple or refurbishing the temple. They said, we discovered a fifth book written by Moses. And there's a whole controversy about it and who actually wrote it, which I'm not going to talk about now. But this is the last chapter, really, of their saga. They're on the border, about to go into the land. The whole book of Deuteronomy is just Moses standing there and recapping their whole journey, our whole history, including the 10 Commandments and everything, at the border. And then at the very end of that book, the last book, he dies. So because he doesn't get to go in, and we learn that in the book of Numbers too. But what I think is fascinating, if you think about the rabbis putting together this book, what they chose to include in the last of the last chapters, the last parsha, and it shows their view of women and it shows their view of men by these two different, and they're very disjointed, the way that they just talk about one subject and jump to another. And in the middle of this chapter is a huge war that I don't want to even deal with. There's like a war that they do with the Moabites and other tribes, but we're not going to talk about that. The way it opens is about the difference between, I guess, responsibility, intelligence, emotional maturity of men and women in the Torah, according to this text. So if you have it, if you downloaded it, or if you have a Chumash, a Torah, it would be the book of Numbers, chapter 30, verse 1 through 16 is what we're going to look at. So Bamidbar, chapter 30. So does anybody have it, or do I need to read it to you? Of course, Roy has it. Okay, so Moses said to the heads of the tribes of Israel, this is what the Lord commands. When a man takes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath to obligate himself by a pledge, he must not break his word, must do everything he said. Now, the word in Hebrew here for a vow is neder. Neder is a very strong vow, and kol nidre is about that kind of vow. We say kol nidre, meaning all the vows that I took that I couldn't fulfill are null and void. You know, please, if I didn't fulfill it, let me start over. So a neder is so binding that I feel like I'm trying to fix this. Okay. A neder is so binding that Orthodox people, when they say, oh, I'll get this for you, or I'll call you next week, a lot of times they add the expression in Hebrew, bli neder, meaning, but it's not a neder. It's not a sacred vow. Bli means without. I'm saying I'm going to try, but I didn't make a vow, because then you would have to be obliged to keep it. So this is, you're about to enter into the land of Israel, and this is what is on Moses's mind, that if you make a vow, you must keep it. When a young woman still living in her father's household makes a vow to the Lord or obligates herself by a pledge, and her father hears about her vow or pledge, but says nothing to her, then all her vows and every pledge by which she obligated herself will stand. So if a young woman, and they don't say what, the rabbi later defines what that means, but if a young woman makes a vow and her father hears it, and he doesn't say anything, fine. But if her father forbids her when he hears it, none of her vows or the pledges by which she has obligated herself will stand. The Lord will release her because her father has forbidden her. Now, a young boy can make a vow and he has to keep it, but a young woman or a young lad, we could say, or a youth, but a young woman, if she makes a vow and her father says no, she's not allowed to keep it. It's no, I mean, she's not obliged, or he says you can't keep it. Her father rules. If she marries after she makes a vow, or after her lips utter a rash promise by which she obligates herself and her husband hears about it but says nothing, then her vows or pledges by which she obligated herself will stand. But if her husband forbids her when he hears it, he nullifies the vow that obligates her or the rash promise by which she obligates herself, and the Lord will release her. So, and I think they don't say a man makes a rash promise, but a woman makes rash promises, they're saying. So right away, the Torah, and I think it's, if we looked at the end of the last Parsha, there was this whole story about the daughters of Zelophehad, these 5 sisters who came to Moses and said, everybody's inheriting, piece of the land, and the sons are inheriting, but what if our father only had 5 daughters and he died, and we think we should be able to inherit, and it's allowed. So if there are no sons, the daughters inherit from the father. But even so, in this very next thing that you hear is that a young woman or a wife cannot take on any kind of vows or responsibilities. Now, let's just speculate. What do you think they mean by what kind of vows would this be? What would they be that a man would take on or a woman would take on that a father or a husband would say no, even though a man could do it? Does anybody have any idea what would you think that kind of vow might be? What would you ever made? I'll tell you an interesting vow my father made. In the 70s, my father loved Israelis. He loved Israelis, and he was always finding young Israelis who, especially if they had been in the army, and bringing them home for Shabbos dinner. And there was this one guy, I can't even remember his name now. He was in, I think, medical school. My father met him. He brought him for dinner. He loved this guy. He was like in his mid or late 20s, didn't have much money. And then the Yom Kippur War broke out. And this young Israeli man had to go back and fight in the war. And my father was very worried. So he went to shul and he made a vow. It's a crazy vow, but if he comes back safe and sound, he's going to give him our car, because he didn't have a car, one of our cars. It was like the car that we had all grown up. I mean, it wasn't a new car, but it was a convertible. It was a red convertible. And he came back and my father gave him the car. So that was like the only time I ever saw, like, he made a vow that, if this happened, I mean, it's kind of like bargaining vow. But what kind of vows do you think people would make that a woman would, or father would say, no, you can't do that? Do you have any ideas? Jeff, you don't even have an idea? You usually have an idea. You're muted, Jeff. Jeff, you're muted. Okay.
I got you now.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that of all the roles of women at the time that these were formulated, the most and highest order of affair was having children.
Right.
And if the wife says and makes a vow, I will never have another child, either with this man or just because, that would be the type of vow that he would instantly want to nullify, because it's against anything that the social society would treat as normal.
That's a good one. So if he said it, he could do it.
I have example like Pnina and Hannah. Hannah could not have children, and she vowed that she will devote her son to God.
That's right.
And she kept her neder.
That's right. She made a vow, and it was Samuel, the prophet Samuel was her son. That's absolutely right. And her husband didn't hear it. She went back by herself. And after everybody was outside and she got down and she was praying near it was a sanctuary, but not, it was before the temple, an place where there was an altar and priests. And the priest, Eli, the Kohen, thought she was drunk because she was talking, praying basically, moving her lips, but he couldn't hear her. And he said, "What are you, a drunk here?" And then she said, "No, I was praying." And by the way, the Talmud uses that template of Hannah's prayer as one of the kinds of ways that we pray, that we don't just, we move our lips, we read the words, with our lips, even if we're whispering or whatever. Miriam.
At first, nothing came to my mind. I could not think of anything that a young woman would say in front of her father or husband. And now I thought of something that she could say in front of both of them, because was it Hannah who just answered about Hannah?
Right.
Weintraub answered about Hannah, and that reminded me of the Bible. So I thought of Yiftach. I thought of
Oh my
Oh,
God.
yeah. Wow.
That's a horrible story.
Yes, but he vowed
What was
that
the
if he
story?
won
What's
the
in
battle,
English?
he won the battle, that the first thing he would do, he would sacrifice. He would see and sacrifice to God. And sure enough, the first person he saw was his daughter.
That's right.
And
Wait,
she
what's her name
did
in English?
get, much to
Jephthah.
our shock, she was sacrificed.
That's right. So here is a case where there's no, perhaps that's why Yom Kippur and Kol Nidre was instituted for things like that, because Kol Nidre was much later than that story of Jephthah's daughter. If you don't know the story, as Miriam said, he went and he fought in a battle, and he said, the first living thing, the first he was thinking would be an animal thing I see, I'm going to sacrifice to God. And who comes running out but his daughter? And because he made this vow and he couldn't be nullified, he had to do it, which is a horrifying story and very disturbing story.
We have a different opposite story about Abraham has to sacrifice Isaac, and at the last minute, God didn't let him do it.
Exactly, but there was
But
no.
that wasn't a vow.
It wasn't a vow, but you're right. He was listening, but it wasn't this. But for some reason, these words, this vow, was considered more stronger than saving this girl's life. And we know, I'm sure the rabbis, totally rewrote this whole thing. We could never do that today, never do that today. So actually though, the thing that I read, that what they were talking about is becoming a Nazir. Now a Nazir was an extreme religious person at that time. We don't even do it anymore, where you vow not to cut your hair for a year, devote yourself to God for a year, not drinking alcohol for a year. And it's like becoming ultra religious for a year. And for the Torah says, a father can forbid, or a husband can forbid his wife or daughter from becoming a Nazir, but a man can be one.
Are these the Noahide laws, the Noahide, or there was another where they didn't cut their hair. I forget the name of it.
Samson.
Well, Samson was a Nazir. He didn't cut his hair.
Oh, okay, so it might be the same one. It's like one is the Noahide
I
law.
don't think the Noahide laws don't talk about that.
No, and then there's somebody that they become something like a Nazirite.
Well,
That's a Nazir.
That's a
That's a
Nazir.
Nazir. Okay, that's okay.
the same
Got
thing.
it. Okay, so
There is one quality of a vow that hasn't been mentioned.
Right.
And that quality is that a vow was limited in time to 30 days under most circumstances.
Mm.
Samson and the Nazir is a different circumstance than what we would say would be a routine vow, because I've read in the past that it had a time limit to it where it was held to 30 days.
I did not know that. I have to look into that, but I believe you, but I'd like to see that. Now, here's something interesting, because I have another part, so I want to go on a little bit. any vow or obligation taken by a widow or a divorced woman will be
Be
binding
nullified.
on her. So if you're if you're a widow or you're divorced, okay, there's no man to boss you around. It seems like it would be a great status in some ways if you could inherit something or whatever, but though it probably was a shame. I mean, a widow, okay, but a divorced woman was probably very repudiated. But a woman who's divorced or widowed, her word can be taken on her own. So again, it's saying if you live with your husband and your husband says no, he can nullify your vow if he hears it, but he has to do it on that day. If he says nothing and the next day, it's binding on her. So this was interesting. And it says, these are the regulations which Moses gave concerning relationships between a man and his wife and between a father and his young daughter still living at home. Now the rabbis, went into this and they defined a young daughter. The rabbis always rewrite things and they said it's between the ages of 11 and 12 is when the father can nullify it, which makes sense. But what about a boy who's 11 or 12? Why is he any more mature or wise? But he gets that status, that respect. So there's this inherent feeling, as we know, about responsibility, even being responsible. And I love the idea, they say she's a rash vow, like a woman is so emotional. She might say something irrational or rash. And a boy would never do that, which we actually know today that the most dangerous animal on the planet is a 20-year-old male. A teenager or a 20-year-old male are the most dangerous animals on the planet because they do the most violence. So it's interesting. Yeah. What'd you say?
I was just going to try to be cute, but it's just over the top. I can't say it. But there is one other comment.
Yeah.
In the Moabite War that you have not talked about,
it's horrible.
when they divided the booty,
Yeah.
they talked about the women that they took. And all the women were killed who were considered to be of childbearing ability. And do you know what age the rabbis and the priest Eleazar decided at that time was
it
what?
12, 14?
3 years old. Every woman 3 years age or older was considered to be a possible concubine or could have children, and they were all killed.
I know.
But it went down to 3 years of age, which
Where is that written?
Is that a commentary? Because it's
Yes,
not.
where is that?
yes, it's part of the commentary.
It's not in the Tanakh.
No, but it does say this, if we're going to talk about it, because I read it and I said, I have a big problem with this. I have a huge problem with this.
Oh,
They go out and they fight and they kill the men and they take all the property and they bring the women back. And Moses says, why did you leave the women alive? Because they are the ones in that religion that were the worshipers of the goddess. They were the sacred prostitutes. They were the bearers of the religion. He said, kill the women except for the virgins. That's what says in the text. And I read it and I just go, in that time, you see, the Torah is an interesting mix of ancient Near East values and then these amazingly modern ethical precepts at the same time. And in that time, that's what they did. The Romans did it. The Babylonians did it. I mean, they all did it, but it's still horrifying. And the fact that Moses is the one telling them to go back and kill the women is, I read it and I went I just repudiate this. I can't go there. But that is what happens in this text. Again, well, they're certainly not the Israelites that were screaming when the spies came back saying, oh, we can't fight, we're afraid, we look like grasshoppers in their eyes, are they? They're not like that anymore. So in a way, his plan worked. They're fierce, merciless warriors so to speak. And that is kind of what the plan was. So who knows what had been going on for all that time. But when you compare them, these fighters to the ones who responded to the spies 40 years before, according to the story, where they were screaming they wanted to go back to Egypt, there's a contrast. But it's
Different generation.
different generation. But do we like this generation particularly with those values? I don't. You know, but I'm sure they would do the same thing to them. You know what I mean? If they had prevailed, they would have taken their women as prostitutes or concubines and whatever. And we know the Romans basically took all their captives and put them in the gladiator rings and did horrible things. So humanity, you know, and we're still kinder today, even for all our cruelty, than we were in, you know, past times. We're a lot kinder and a lot more compassionate. And that's what the rabbis really focused on once the temple was destroyed, because that was a brutal, brutal destruction. And I think everybody was just sickened and said, we have to like find another way to live, because that was the way it was all over the ancient world, in Greece, Rome, you know, everywhere, Syria. Okay, so I wanted to jump to this other thing about the way that the Torah thinks about men. And it's interesting because this is after the battle that we just talked about. And this is a pretty interesting, what would I call it? Concept of these cities of refuge that God tells Moses, and Moses tells the people that when you get to the land, you're going to set up 6 cities of refuge. So does anybody, I'm sure some of you know what a city of refuge is. Somebody share what that is, so I'm not talking. Susan Ehrlich, what's a city of refuge?
Where Manslaughter is offered refuge, and there were 6 of them, weren't there? 3 on one side of the Jordan and 3 on the others. And they were there, it just interestingly, till the high priest or the Levite, remind me of that, died.
Yeah, but wait, what's a manslayer?
Someone who slays someone else, who, but inadvertently.
So it's manslaughter. Manslaughter is accidental death. If someone is a murderer, it says in this text, they have to be put to death. However, it's very interesting. You have to have 2 eyewitnesses to the murder. And that's really hard to have 2. Well, I guess sometimes you would see 2 eyewitnesses. If lying in wait, if you're deliberately, you know, take something and you kill someone deliberately, it's capital punishment. So that has to happen. But if you accidentally kill somebody, you can go to these cities of refuge. Why? Why do we need cities of refuge? Because the family is so bloodthirsty that they're going to take vengeance and try to kill the manslaughter, the guy who committed the accident. There's no court that's going to protect him from the vengeance. So there's this idea of a vengeful males in the family, or it's their honor, or they're not going to stand for it. I mean, we talk about the Hatfields and the McCoys, the feuds. And so you can go and live in this city and they can't come in, the Avengers, but you can't go out. You can't go out until the high priest dies. The ruling high priest dies. Why? Why do you think that? And there's a lot of debate. Why would you have to wait until, and then you're like absolved and there can be no vengeance, or that person would be considered a murderer, the avenger. But if you leave, all bets are off. So you're quarantined in this city, which could be a nice city. I mean, I don't know. Okay, so why do you think, what does it have to do with the high priest? I'd love your speculation. What would that have to do with the high priest? Anybody have any ideas? Jill, you're muted.
You're muted.
Okay.
I said, no, I have no idea.
Put it louder, Jill. Put your volume.
She said,
up.
no, I have no
I
idea.
have no idea. Ask the
Any-
question again. What's the question?
Why, if the person who's, killed somebody accidentally,
Yep.
and he knows the family was going to try to get revenge, you can go to one of these 6 cities and live there, but you can't leave, but you're safe. It's like sanctuary, like going into a church and having sanctuary. It's like a safe sanctuary, but you cannot leave until the high priest in the temple in Jerusalem dies. So anybody have any idea why?
I do.
Who said that?
Peg, but
Oh,
my
Peg.
phone,
Peg, let me see you.
I can't do it. The phone somehow thinks I'm in driving mode.
Okay,
Don't.
all right, go ahead.
But I think that it's because the high priest is so important that you can't negate something that he said.
Okay, but why? Then there's a new high priest right after him, his son.
Yeah, but the new high priest doesn't have to honor what the other high priest said. It
Well,
just,
Okay, but the high priest didn't say that. This is in the Torah. He
Yeah.
didn't make this rule. It's in the Torah.
okay.
So, but yeah, wait, anyone else besides Jeff? Jeff?
This has a dual concept to it. In essence, the priest of the time who accepts this man's word absolves him in a sense. And in Christianity, that type of act was called the sin eater in Christianity. They gave ablution to the sinner by absorbing the sin within themselves. And in a sense, the high priest in the city who gives him sanctuary is absolving him and absorbing his impurity, so to speak.
So
It's
I
a
like that idea.
purification rite.
I like that idea, but he's not sheltering him. The high priest is in Jerusalem, and the guy could be, in Eilat or, Hebron, or he could be in.
I thought it was the death of the priest or the rabbi or the
when
Kohen
the
of
priest
the
dies.
sanctuary city, not in Jerusalem.
No, in Jerusalem, the Kohen Hagadol, the big one, Barbara.
I just have a guess, but it doesn't kind of make much sense to me. My guess is that maybe it has to do with how many years pass. But the reason it doesn't make that much sense to me is you figure that the high priest in Jerusalem is already quite old.
Right.
So you would think that less years need to pass.
Right.
Then would make sense to wait till he dies.
So, yes, Susan.
Well, this is what Etz Chaim says. So, because I think it's very puzzling too, but that the high priest is beloved. When he dies, everyone's in mourning, and that that mourning would lessen their desire for their own mourning and desire for revenge. That's what they.
So according to Eitz Chaim, which is one of the Chumashes, it has some great commentaries, it's saying that the death of the high priest will soften everyone's heart, and they'll be in grief for him. And so they won't have the heart or the desire to avenge the death anymore. Miriam.
I don't have a Rashi in front of me, but I think I remember Rashi alluding to or saying something like the high priest bears a certain responsibility because he could have somehow prevented it. I know it was controversial, but that the high priest needs to preach love or patience or the kaveshet yitzro, or what's the word for that, or curtailing your evil actions, or curtailing ayin hara'ah. But I remember Rashi saying something about that he bore a responsibility.
That's a possibility. Now, what I read, the high priest, first of all, is so pure, we can just remind ourselves, is that once a year, only he goes into the Holy of Holies on Yom Kippur to pray for the Jewish people. He has a very, very high, level of holiness and purity. And he's so pure according to this commentary, that when he dies, it's like it's kind of what Jeff said in a way, taking the sins of the manslaughter people with him. Like it nullifies their sins with his death, which is a little Christian-y in a way, you know, with this idea of dying for your sins. But it's like he purifies sins with when he dies, like he leaves this residue of purity, and so they can come out then and start their lives anew.
Can I read what Rashi says here? There's a paragraph specific to this.
Okay, go ahead, tell us.
Until the death of the Kohen Gadol bears some responsibility for the death. Why? Because he should have prayed that fatal accidents would not occur during his tenure. And this is what Rashi says. So he's indirectly, through lack of teaching or effort, indirectly responsible for the death, and it's not just the manslaughterer who's responsible.
Right. However, we realize, because they put up 6 cities that in a small country, that they didn't expect the Kohen's prayers to have that much effect, because they really had a plan for, all the Avengers, the bloodthirsty Avengers. And if you did leave the city and the Avenger, the family, caught you and killed you, you were not culpable. You were not guilty. It's like this idea of blood vengeance existed in ancient Israel. And
today too. Today too in the Muslim world.
That's right. Blood vengeance, and in other places too. But the idea that it's not like they outlawed it, which I find interesting. They didn't say you can't do it. They just said, well, we're going to try to protect you because we can't stop it. So that to me reflects a certain view of human nature, or the male Avengers, that there's no way we're going to be able to stop them. All we can do is basically hide you and protect you, and for a certain amount of time, and then they can't do it anymore, or they're considered murderers. But if you leave during that time, they're not culpable. I find that very strange.
It says the duration of exile is therefore left to an event ordained by God only.
Right.
So.
Yes. Well, that's Rashi.
Excuse me, blood avengers are never punished. Like in India or in the Muslim world, where they're allowed to kill a woman who is accused of rape, even if she was not touched, or accused of having a boyfriend, they're allowed to kill her.
That's right.
Are they never punished? Avengers? Is that what you're saying?
Actually, today they're starting to bring people to justice in court, but for hundreds or thousands of years, no. And I'll talk 1 second, Talia.
Oh, hi everyone, Shabbat Shalom. I was just gonna bring up what Miriam just brought up, is the honor killings. And it's all like the vengeance, the blood vengeance is all about an honor, which is all about an ego, which to me seems the opposite of God. So it's hard for me to compute it, but I mean, it still goes on with the mafia. It's all honor killings. And if the mafia is bigger than, the police force, or has purchased or, pays off the police force, they get away with it, and they don't have to have any accountability or repercussions for it. And so it's all like, to me, it just screams like honor killings, like the whole idea of women. And we're wondering, like, why is it okay for them to do anything like that with women? It's because women are looked at as being property. So again, it's the male ego that I own, not only, all animals on this earth, but all the women also, even if they're my wife that's chosen, not, a child, is really ego, like in full force, bad, evil, like function.
Okay, so
I want to say something. May I?
Just 1 second, Hannah, just 1 second. I'm going to let you say something.
Okay.
Yes, but Rabbinic Judaism completely protects women and daughters. You may not have the same, rights and like to make a vow or whatever, but you divorce for cruelty, you can divorce your husband if he beats you, you know, none of that is allowed in rabbinic Judaism, where they basically, you know, rethought the ancient Near East biblical Judaism and said, no, we're not, this is not acceptable. So, and that is the Judaism that we live. Hannah, go ahead.
Yes, I have an example from today's politics. For example, the President of United States, when they change, there is a new elected one, so the old one can let people free from the prison. And that's happened also in the Israeli president, that they can, by their judgment, let prisoner go. And so it's like something like that with the Kohen HaGadol and the president.
The pardon, you can give those pardons at the end, those presidential pardons.
Right.
And they do end up pardoning their cronies and their friends. And well, this president didn't even wait. He just already pardoned Roger Stone. So, yes, so I agree with you, but, and in Judaism, there's no honor killings, but there's the sota ordeal, which if a man, I don't know if we studied it here, if a husband suspects, he doesn't have to have any proof that his wife is unfaithful, he can bring her before, you know, the community, and they force her to drink this. First of all, they uncover her hair. They uncover her hair, which is, you know, very humiliating because a woman's supposed to have her hair covered. They even
they remove her clothing as well.
Well, they don't remove it. They tear it or open. They kind of do. And then they force her to drink this horrible concoction.
Bitter water.
Yeah, this water. And if she swells up or gets sick or whatever, has a certain physical response, she's guilty. And there's no and if she doesn't, she's not guilty. But the husband has no repercussions for the accusation.
Okay, so that's like the witch trials. That's like putting a rock on a woman and saying if she floats, she's a witch, but if she sinks, then we know she was human, but then she's dead.
Right, exactly. So that the sota, though, we don't do it anymore, but that is another, that we didn't kill them.
You humiliated them.
We humiliated them.
Well, like what is it? The Scarlet Letter.
Yeah, really. And it's quite upsetting also, but these are things that the rabbis kind of like, even having two wives, the rabbis stopped all of that. The Ashkenazi rabbis, the Sephardic rabbis allowed it for a long time. So this is like all this thing about the city of refuge, but then the very end of the book, the very end of the end goes back to women. And I'm laughing because I think this is on your mind when you're about to enter the land. This is all they can think about. So this is what happened. This is Numbers
24/7/365.
Numbers 36, 1 through 13. The family heads of the clan of Gilad, son of Machir of Manasseh, who were from the clans of, all right, these clans, all the clans came to Moses, and this is what they're worried about. Remember I told you about these daughters who said, oh, if our brothers we have no brothers, we get to inherit, we're equal.
Right.
When the Lord commanded my Lord to give the land as an inheritance to the Israelites by lot, he ordered you to give the inheritance of our brothers Zelophehad to his daughters. They're still thinking about it. This is from like war ago or this ago. Now, suppose they marry men from other Israelite tribes. Then their inheritance will be taken from our ancestral inheritance and added to that of the tribe they marry. So because these women own their own property, they brought it with them to their husbands. So if they didn't marry from their tribe, then their property would belong to their husband's tribe. And like, God forbid, you know, that these girls should have their own decision and their own land to do what they want. And so part of the inheritance of our part, our allotted to us, will be taken away. Right. So then Moses thinks about it. He says, this is what God commands. They can marry anyone they want as long as it's in their father's tribal clan.
Right.
No inheritance in Israel is to pass from one tribe to the other, for every Israelite shall keep the tribal inheritance. So, and they did, the girls did it. But what we love about it is they mention their names. So they're very important girls. They did as the Lord commanded, And their daughters' names were Mala, Tirzah, Chogla, Milcah, and Noah. See, Noah is a beautiful Israeli name that we still have today. That
Yes.
and so is Tirzah. I mean, Milcah also. Well, they're all from these 5 sisters. And so they married their cousins. But I find it so puzzling that this is the last commandment in the whole 4 books, because the 5th book wasn't written for a few hundred years, is about women's inheritance and women's rights, and that it's on their mind. And we want to make sure that we have it just right, and that we're all going, because they're all thinking now about their inheritance, about the land they're about to inhabit. And it's like, and suddenly it's like, wait a minute, you're going to have more than us. If she marries, and then suddenly, and it shows a mentality of like, nobody should get more than I got, and that human nature is so reflected to me in this whole parsha, with the wars, the different, the cities of refuge that show, vengeance is uncontrollable. The idea that women can't manage their lives. So we have come a long way, because we certainly don't think that today in Judaism. So that's what makes us very, I think, wonderful, and that, we're not still living biblical Judaism. We're not even living all of rabbinic Judaism. We're living Reform Judaism. We're living a modern kind of, and we're still keeping the values that are universal or eternal, and letting go of the other things. Let's see.
Susan?
Yes.
I can flip it with, I see the cities of refuge as a positive thing. Rather than, there were bloodthirsty avengers around, and I see that's a very positive thing that the Torah allows for.
I agree.
Of refuge. And then the Daughters of Zelophehad, I think my feeling is it's less about not letting women do what they want than it's about the tribal issue.
No, I agree. I think it's about, we don't want that tribe to have more land than we have.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
The whole motivation there, because the truth of the matter is, when they go to another tribe, well, yes, and go to another tribe, that tribe will have it. The daughters don't
They're
have
very worried about this. They haven't even gotten it yet. I just think it's the last thing on their mind. But I do think that the cities of refuge are good. But I'm saying the reason for them is because you can't control the avenger. Right. We are going to protect the person, the manslaughterer, because it was an accident. But what I'm saying is they didn't make a law saying you may not avenge, because they didn't think anyone would listen to it. Mm-hmm. They said, okay, we'll have, just like people take sanctuary in a church, because if you step outside, you can't control the avenger, and the sanctuary is in the church. So this is the sanctuary of cities, which is a very ingenious idea, really.
Yes, I want to say something.
Yes.
I think that the 2 things that we end the parasha is a symbol of compromise, meaning that it's a kind of solution that everybody will be happy and nobody will feel deprived. So the thing with the Daughters of Zelophehad is that yes, you can have your heritage, but so it's kind of nice way, politically correct solution to a situation.
Correct. Okay.
To a situation with a conflict.
Yes. Okay. I think that's a good way to view it. And
so may I ask a question?
Yes.
Just a very quick question. It seems that these are very trivial things as you were about to enter the promised land. What should they have had on their minds instead?
Wait, Miriam, you broke up. What was the question?
It seems like these are trivial, unimportant things compared to what? I'm asking you a very sincere question.
Oh, what would be a more important thing?
Would have been more appropriate.
Let's see. If you're going into a new land, so how we're going to set up the courts, how we're going to set up the schools, where we're going to put our sanctuaries for thanking God, when we're going to have something about our harvest. I mean, it's all in there, but I just think it's interesting at the end, the way the rabbis arranged when they put the Torah together and they put the chapters together, they chose the scribes how to organize things. And I think it's just interesting that at the very, very end, it goes, I know they're about to step into the land, so it's on their mind. But I don't know, they already talked about it once in the end of the Parsha right before, and it's like they've been thinking about it this whole time, and it comes up again. So, but as Hannah said, it is a compromise. They're worried about, but they're worried about their own possessions. There's nothing about national unity here to me. And I think that's what Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, really does. It's so philosophical. It talks about our obligation to be, good Jews, good, to live it says choose life. The V'ahavta is in the book of Deuteronomy. The Shema is in the book of Deuteronomy. The 10 Commandments are reviewed. So it's like, that's a very satisfying end as opposed to this. So if you're Orthodox, you read it that way. But in terms of the way it was put together, that book didn't come for several hundred years, but it's really important. The book of Deuteronomy really completes the Torah. Yes, Penina.
Well, there is a sentence that says, "En mukdam u'meuchar b'Torah." There is no early or late in the Torah. In other words, what we think was the last law that they gave to kill the women may have not been the last one.
No, I agree.
And the chapter were not in order of the events necessarily. So, like you said, that the rabbis kind of like thought that this is how it went, maybe, and the scribes who wrote the Torah maybe also had something to do with it. But some certain books weren't even discovered. When the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered, all of a sudden we had the Sefer HaChashmonaim, the book of the Chashmonaim, which the Torah doesn't even have it. And that's such a big story. So I don't put my stamp on it that might have been the last law.
No,
but
I don't think
that the fact that it was a terrible law, this I do not dispute. Now I have another thing is that about the role of the high priest. You could look at him as a governor today. He was in charge of all the laws, and if he decided that this guy was worthy of being
hold on,
being excused.
Hold on.
Go ahead. I had to turn off my phone. Go ahead.
Yeah. So if the priest decided, the high priest decided that he is worthy of staying in the city, so that means that he may have weighed the situation and listened to the circumstances. And then comes a new governor when he dies, or a new high priest. This guy doesn't really know what happened. He doesn't know the exact circumstances unless he would be informed.
Right.
So because he doesn't have the proofs or the evidence, when the first one dies, there is no way of knowing whether this guy was guilty or not. So he lets him go. That's it.
So Merle Weiner, I think she said on Facebook, the high priest makes all the rules and nothing changes till he dies. Is a guess. This is a guess that with Orthodox rabbis too, she's asking. I think, the rules are the same for I think the rules are inherited. They are what they are with the high priest. And I don't know if the high priest was informed of all the people in the cities of refuge. And I wonder, we don't know how to know. There's no way to know how many people were in. I mean, it wasn't only them. There were other people in that city. But how many people were running away from the Avengers? It would be interesting to know. Were there a lot? Were there a few? Who were they?
They said.
So it's fascinating.
A lot. I think a lot.
Wikipedia.
Wait, raise your hand so I can call you one at a time. Abby?
If you look at Wikipedia about cities of refuge.
Yes, I love that you're all looking at sources. It's fantastic.
Yeah, so first they say there was 3, I just lost that way, and then there was 9. Let's see. Oh, wait, in the priestly code, wait, here it is. Well, then they said, expand the city refuge camp to all 48 Levitical cities.
Really?
Maimonides involving Talmudic literature expands the city of refuge count to all 48 Levitical cities. Outside of these cities, blood vengeance against such perpetrators was allowed by law. The Bible names the 6 cities as being cities of refuge: Golan, Ramoth, Hazor, the east of the Jordan River, and 3 others.
Right.
So
they're
if
saying
you
they
look at
spent-
Wikipedia, it gives a very good overview. Because it says, like, the book of Joshua reiterates these regulations. It's a very
detailed.
Very detailed. And yeah.
Yeah, well, if the Levites lived in their own special cities and they were supported by the rest of the community because they worked in the temple. So if they were all cities of refuge, they must have needed all places.
They said officially there were 6.
Yeah, that's the Torah has 6.
Yeah, officially there was 6. But
when you calculate the size of the Levitical cities, and I did this once, each of these cities is over 2,000 acres.
Wow.
So these were not trivial properties, and the wealth that they had in livestock, cattle, sheep, etc., required that area for grazing. And I'll just make one other comment, if I may. They talked about this possibly being a trivial chapter, and it's
No, not a trivial, that
it's just the opposite. The most important issue is the inheritance of the property to these people in the desert, because it does one thing. It finally satisfies God's promise to Abraham that they will inherit and acquire the land. So that point that they're dividing and trying to create an equitable system for women as well as for the tribes themselves and those who actually left, the important point was only those who left Egypt were entitled to a portion. So there was a lot of political elements to this final discussion about property.
But they died. All of them died.
No, but they're children.
They're
This is
children.
a familial inheritance through the clan families.
Clan and tribe and whatever. Well,
I want to say something. May I say something?
Yeah.
I think that generally speaking, if there is a law in the Torah, it's based on reality, and the reality is that, like for example, do not murder, meaning that there were people who killed. That's why I said the same thing is with everything, that it's based on reality. Otherwise, there wouldn't have been a law.
No, I agree with you. I always say that if they tell you not to do it, it's because people are doing it. They wouldn't have a law. Okay, we're going to end with Talia, but you're muted. Okay.
Can hear.
Hi. So this is interesting because talking about the holding on to the land and like not allowing the daughters in the beginning to inherit and keeping women from owning property is a complete power move. And we did that in the United States with the Black community. When we had reparations and we were going to give 40 acres, that got reversed, and that set in an economic imbalance. And that's what it does for women. And I mean, it's amazing to see the parallels between sexism and racism and, the women. Anyway, I just found that to be fascinating, that it's always a thing, if you own land, you have power. So
power, you have standing in the community is what you have. You have standing, which is
the women though, if they were smart, they would stay in that community, because then they would continue to have that land.
Well, they have to stay. They can't marry
No,
out.
but if they married to another tribe, then they would leave that land.
No, it came with them. It came with them.
Oh, I thought it said that the land did not come with
No,
them.
if there's no son, that's the whole controversy.
Oh, they're allowed to leave with their land?
Well, they're not, because the tribal leaders came and said, right now they own the land. If they marry, the land goes with them to their husband. So, and then it'll come
Oh.
out of our tribal allotments. So then they said, okay, they can only marry people from our tribe.
That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you for a great discussion, everyone.
Well, thank
Shabbat
you.
shalom. It's always
Shabbat
fun to
shalom.
You always
meet
do
you.
a great
Have
job.
a great
Shalom.
week, and I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye-bye.